Eleanor Blackwood was 10 years old the morning she opened her cabin door to find a wolf staring back at her. 3 days. That's how long her mother had been gone. 3 days since Sarah Blackwood walked into the Montana wilderness to photograph elk and never returned. 3 days since grandmother Maggie followed her daughter into the forest and vanished too. The wolf was massive, 95 pounds of gray-silver fur, amber eyes fixed on Ellie with an intelligence that made her breath catch. She recognized those eyes. 6 months ago, she'd freed this wolf's pups from an illegal trap, watched the mother circle back, watching. Now, Silverback stood in 2 feet of fresh snow. December wind howling at -23 degrees. The worst blizzard in 50 years was intensifying. The 72-hour survival window was closing. The wolf turned, looked back at Ellie, then into the dark forest. "Follow me." Ellie grabbed her father's knife and stepped into the storm. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Blackwood family had been breaking apart long before the forest tried to swallow them whole. Eleanor, Ellie to everyone who mattered, had learned early that different meant dangerous. At school, the other kids called her the weird one, the girl who talked to animals instead of people. High-functioning autism, the doctor said, as if giving it a name made it easier. It didn't. She'd stopped trying to make friends by 3rd grade. Animals were simpler. Animals didn't lie. Her father understood that. Thomas Blackwood had taught her to track deer, read wolf prints, survive in wilderness that killed the unprepared. 2 years ago, he died in what her mother called a logging accident. Ellie was 8 when they lowered his casket into frozen ground. She didn't cry at the funeral. Crying didn't bring people back. Sarah Blackwood had been 36 when she became a widow. A freelance wildlife photographer barely scraping by, she now carried the weight of a daughter who needed her and a mother who was forgetting how to be human. The medical bills were crushing, $47,000 from treatments they couldn't afford. The bank had sent foreclosure notices, 30 days to pay or lose the cabin. They were down to 2 days now. But Sarah never told Ellie about the cancer eating through her lungs. Stage 3. Inoperable without money they'd never have. She'd rather die than burden her daughter with that truth. Grandmother Maggie, at 72, was disappearing in a different way. What everyone thought was Alzheimer's disease had stolen her memories, left her wandering at night calling for a husband 10 years dead. She'd once been a wildlife biologist, had mapped these forests in the 70s before marriage made her choose between career and family. Now she couldn't remember her granddaughter's name half the time, but she remembered wolves. Always wolves. The 3 of them lived 12 miles from the nearest town, in a cabin surrounded by Douglas fir and secrets. No cell service. A landline the recent storm had cut. When Sarah left 3 days ago with her camera equipment and a desperate hope that selling photos might save them, Maggie had followed. The old woman insisted, said something about remembering the way. Neither came home. Ellie had waited because her mother made her promise. Stay inside. Don't come looking. But promises meant nothing when the people you loved were dying in the snow. December 21st had dawned cold and clear. Sarah stood in the cabin doorway, camera bag slung over her shoulder, breath fogging in the pre-dawn darkness. The elk migration was happening. It happened every year. But this year, she needed the photographs to be perfect, portfolio-worthy. The kind of work that might catch a magazine editor's eye, might bring in enough money to stop the foreclosure. "I'll be back before dinner," she'd told Ellie, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Keep the fire going." Maggie had appeared from her room, already dressed in winter gear. "I'm coming with you." "Mom, you should rest. I mapped these trails in 1975. Maggie's voice had been sharp, lucid. "I know where the elk gather. You need me?" Sarah had hesitated, then nodded. Maybe her mother was having a good day. Maybe the fog in her mind had cleared. Ellie watched them disappear into the tree line, two figures swallowed by Douglas fir and morning mist. Her mother's final words hung in the frozen air. "If I'm not back by dark, stay inside. Don't come looking." She'd promised. The first day alone, December 22nd, Ellie maintained her routine like her father had taught her. Keep the fire fed, melt snow for drinking water, ration the canned food, only 2 cans left now. She tried the landline every hour. Dead. The storm had taken the lines down. Her mother's cell phone lay on the kitchen table, forgotten in the rush to leave. Ellie wasn't worried yet. Her mother often lost track of time when photographing. Light changed. Animals moved. You followed or you missed the shot. She spent the afternoon studying tracks in the snow around the cabin. Rabbit, deer, coyote. And there, large paw prints, distinctive because one toe left a shallower impression. Injured. She recognized them from 6 months ago. The memory came sharp and clear. Summer. The sound of whimpering in the forest. Ellie had followed it to find 5 wolf pups trapped in illegal steel jaw traps, the kind poachers used despite the laws. The pups were maybe 3 months old, crying, bleeding. Sarah had helped her spring the traps, treat the wounds with the first aid kit. They'd worked quickly, knowing the mother would be close, possibly dangerous. But the mother wolf had simply watched from the trees. Gray-silver coat, amber eyes. When they finished and backed away, the wolf approached her pups, sniffed them, then looked directly at Ellie. A long, measuring stare. Then she'd gathered her babies and disappeared. One pup had favored its left front paw, injured worse than the others. Now, on day 2 alone, Ellie saw those same uneven prints circling the cabin. The injured pup, grown now, nearly full size, watching. December 23rd brought fear. The temperature dropped to -20 degrees. The blizzard everyone had been predicting arrived with violence, wind screaming through the trees, visibility dropping to nothing. Ellie tried to hike toward town, made it 200 yards before panic set in. She couldn't see the cabin anymore, couldn't see anything but white. She turned back, following her own rapidly disappearing footprints, heart hammering. Her mother had been gone 2 days. In this cold, in this storm, how long could someone survive? That night, Ellie saw the wolf clearly for the first time. Silverback, she'd named her that, for the gray-silver fur along her spine, stood at the tree line, just visible in the glow from the cabin windows. Not approaching, just watching. Present. "What are you trying to tell me?" Ellie whispered against the glass. The wolf stared back, then melted into darkness. December 24th. Christmas Eve morning. Ellie woke to scratching at the door. Her father's hunting knife was in her hand before she was fully conscious. The cabin was freezing. Fire had died to embers overnight. She'd slept too long. The scratching came again. Deliberate. Insistent. She opened the door. Silverback sat in 2 feet of fresh snow, breath steaming. The wolf was enormous up close. She'd grown so much in 6 months, 90 pounds at least, eyes that held something that looked almost human, desperate. The wolf's left front leg was bleeding, fresh trap wound. Despite the injury, despite the pain, she'd come here. Silverback stood, walked 10 feet, stopped, looked back at Ellie, whined softly. The universal signal every human recognizes. Follow me. Ellie's mind raced. Her mother's words, stay inside, don't come looking. But her mother had been gone 3 days, 72 hours in negative 23 degrees. The survival window was closing. If they weren't already dead, they would be soon. The wolf whined again. Ellie made her choice. She grabbed her mother's oversized parka, her father's boots, the survival kit from the closet, matches, knife, flare gun, first aid supplies. She scrawled a note on paper. Went with the wolf to find Mom. 6:47 a.m. Ellie. The wolf waited patiently. Ellie stepped into the storm. The forest swallowed them whole within minutes. Silverback moved with purpose through snow that came to Ellie's waist, the wolf's injured leg leaving a drag mark in the powder. Every 50 yards the animal stopped, looked back to ensure the child was following, amber eyes patient despite the urgency radiating from her body. Ellie had been walking for an hour when her legs began to scream. The cold bit through her layers, her mother's parka too big, her father's boots heavy and awkward. She'd thought she knew cold. She'd been wrong. This was the kind of cold that turned fingers purple, that made breathing painful, that whispered promises of sleep if you'd just sit down for a moment. She knew better than to sit. Her father had taught her that. Fear is normal, Ellie. Panic kills. Count your breaths. Keep moving. So she counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe out. The numbers became a rhythm, a meditation against the wind's howl. Silverback never took the main trail. Instead, she led Ellie through dense stands of Douglas fir, around frozen streams, under fallen logs that formed natural tunnels through the snow. The wolf tested ice before crossing, waited when Ellie slipped, positioned herself downwind as if to block the worst of the storm. At the 2-hour mark, Silverback stopped abruptly at a fork in the path. Her entire body went rigid. She sniffed the ground intensely, whining, circling. Ellie caught up, gasping, and saw what had captured the wolf's attention. A wool scarf hung from a low branch, frozen stiff, covered in ice crystals. Red and green plaid, hand-knitted. Ellie's blood went cold for reasons that had nothing to do with temperature. She knew that scarf. Had watched her grandmother knit it 2 winters ago, sitting by the fire, needles clicking in rhythm. Maggie had worn it everywhere. Said the pattern reminded her of her late husband's favorite flannel shirt. "Grandma," Ellie whispered. The word came out strangled. It wasn't just her mother out here. Her grandmother had followed Sarah into the wilderness, and both women were lost in the worst blizzard Montana had seen in 50 years. Silverback sniffed 2 different sets of tracks leading away from the scarf, one heading northeast, one heading east. Both women had walked this way, but separately. Ellie's mind raced. Why would they separate? Had her grandmother gotten confused, wandered off the trail? Had they fought? The memory hit her like a physical blow. 2 years ago, right after her father's funeral. Ellie had been hiding in the hallway listening to the adults argue in the kitchen. "I told you he wasn't stable." Maggie's voice, sharp with something between anger and grief. "I warned you, Sarah, but you wouldn't listen. He was my husband," her mother's voice breaking. "Your warnings killed him. He felt judged every single day. That pressure. I wanted better for you than a logger with a high school diploma and depression he wouldn't treat. He made me happy. But you couldn't see that. You only saw what he wasn't. And now you're a widow at 36 with a child to raise alone." The silence that followed had been worse than the shouting. Ellie had pressed herself against the wall, small and invisible, understanding for the first time that her father's sadness, the dark moods, the days he couldn't get out of bed, had been about more than just brain chemistry. He'd felt insufficient, judged, not good enough for the woman he loved by the woman who'd given birth to her. Her grandmother had opposed the marriage, had made her disapproval known, and her father had absorbed that disapproval until it became part of his own self-image. After that argument, her mother and grandmother had barely spoken. They lived in the same house but existed in separate silences, and Ellie had navigated the space between them like a diplomat in a Cold War. Now both women were out here, lost, possibly dying, and Ellie didn't know if they'd reconciled or if they'd died still holding on to that bitter history. Silverback's urgency pulled her back to the present. The wolf was moving faster now, limping heavily but determined. Blood spotted the snow behind her, the trap wound reopening with exertion. Ellie made a decision. "Wait," she called out. The wolf stopped. Ellie pulled out the first aid kit, knelt beside Silverback. "Let me help." For a moment she thought the wolf would bolt. Wild animals didn't let humans touch them. But Silverback held still, leg extended, as Ellie cleaned the wound with snow and wrapped it with gauze and medical tape. It wouldn't hold long, but it might slow the bleeding. "You saved their lives once," Ellie whispered, securing the bandage. "I saved yours. Now we're even, right?" Silverback licked Ellie's face, tongue rough and warm, then stood, testing the bandaged leg, and resumed walking. They'd been traveling for 2.5 hours when Ellie noticed something that made her stomach drop. 3 sets of boot prints in a sheltered area beneath a rock overhang, preserved from the worst of the snow. Size 6 women's boots, her mother's. Size 8 winter boots, her grandmother's, and size 12 men's boots. Heavy tread, fresh, maybe a day old. Who else was out here? Ellie's mind supplied possibilities, each worse than the last. A hiker? Unlikely in this weather. A poacher? Possible. The illegal traps she'd found 6 months ago proved someone was breaking the law out here. A rescue worker? But nobody knew they were missing. She hadn't been able to call for help. Silverback sniffed the 3rd set of prints and kept walking, unconcerned. If the wolf wasn't threatened, maybe the person wasn't dangerous. But the mystery gnawed at Ellie. 3 people had walked this trail in the last few days. 2 she knew. 1 she didn't. The temperature was dropping. The sky, what little she could see through the tree cover, was darkening to a bruised purple gray. Another wave of the blizzard was coming. The meteorologists had predicted it, and she was miles from the cabin with no way home. Silverback found a small overhang of rock and stopped, looking at Ellie expectantly. "Rest?" Ellie asked. The wolf lay down, creating a windbreak with her body. Ellie huddled against the animal's warmth, feeling the steady rise and fall of breathing, the heat radiating from fur designed to withstand far worse cold than any human could generate. Her body was shutting down, fingers numb, face burning with cold, lips cracked and bleeding. She wanted to sleep so badly. Silverback nudged her, hard, then licked her face aggressively, not gently. The message was clear. Don't sleep. Keep fighting. "Okay," Ellie whispered. "Okay. I'm awake." She forced herself to eat a granola bar from her pack, drink water from a bottle that was starting to freeze solid, rubbed her hands together to keep circulation going, counted to 100, then 200, then started over. After 15 minutes, Silverback stood. Time to move. As they left the shelter, Ellie heard something that made her heart leap, the distant sound of running water. But that was impossible. Everything should be frozen solid. They were heading toward the ravines. Her father had warned her about them. Deep cuts in the earth where water runs even in winter. Snow hides the edges. You could walk right off a cliff and never know it was coming. Silverback's pace increased to almost a run. Ellie struggled to keep up, gasping, legs burning. Then she saw it. A scrap of red fabric caught on a branch, the same color as her mother's winter jacket, and beneath it, older, darker stains in the snow. Blood. Silverback threw back her head and howled, the sound echoing through the forest, ancient and mournful. They were close now. Whatever waited ahead, good or terrible, they would face it within the hour. Ellie forced her frozen legs forward and followed the wolf toward the truth. 3 days earlier, Sarah and Maggie Blackwood had walked this same trail in uncomfortable silence. The forest had been quieter then, before the blizzard, just the crunch of boots on frost and the distant bugling of elk preparing for their winter migration. "The elk should be at Miller's Meadow," Maggie said suddenly, her voice clearer than it had been in months. "Northridge. That's where they gather before moving to lower elevations." Sarah glanced at her mother, surprised. "How do you remember that? You forgot my birthday last week." Maggie's face tightened. "Some memories won't let go. I mapped this entire area in 1975, before I gave it all up." The bitterness in those last words hung between them like smoke. Sarah wanted to respond, wanted to say something about sacrifice and choices and the way women of her mother's generation had been forced to choose between ambition and family. But she was too tired, too sick. The cancer in her lungs made every breath a small war, and she'd stopped fighting battles she couldn't win. They walked in silence for another mile. When they reached the ridge, the elk were there, dozens of them, massive bulls with antlers that caught the morning light, cows and calves browsing on what vegetation they could find beneath the snow. It was perfect. Magazine cover perfect. Sarah set up her camera with practiced efficiency, telephoto lens, adjusting for the light. The morning sun turned the elk's breath to gold. She clicked the shutter again and again, knowing with photographer's instinct that these were the shots that could save them. This was work that mattered. Maggie watched her daughter work, and something in her chest cracked open. Pride mixed with regret. This was what she'd given up. The fieldwork, the documentation, the quiet thrill of capturing nature's truth. She'd been good at it once. Before marriage, before motherhood, before the world told her she had to choose. "Sarah," she started, the apology she'd written 47 times finally on her lips. "About Thomas. I was wrong. I should have—" "Don't!" Sarah didn't lower the camera. "Not now. Let me work." Maggie fell silent. Another moment lost. Another chance at reconciliation slipping away like snow through fingers. In the present, Ellie stumbled over a fallen branch hidden beneath the snow and nearly fell. Silverback caught her jacket in her teeth, yanked her upright. The wolf was tiring, too. The bandage on her leg was soaked through with blood. Her breathing labored. "I'm sorry," Ellie whispered. "I'm slowing you down." The wolf released her jacket and kept walking. Not abandoning. Never abandoning. Ellie's mind drifted as she walked, exhaustion pulling memories to the surface like debris in a flood. Her mother's hands, teaching her how to hold a camera steady. Photography is patience, baby. You wait for the world to show you its truth. The same hands, months later, shaking as they counted out pills from an orange prescription bottle, painkillers for the cancer Sarah thought Ellie didn't know about. But Ellie had seen the bills, had read the words stage 3 and inoperable, even if she hadn't fully understood them. She remembered her mother crying in the bathroom late at night, trying to muffle the sound so Ellie wouldn't hear. She'd heard anyway, had pressed her ear to the door and listened to her mother break down, whisper screaming into a towel about money and time and all the things she'd never get to see her daughter become. And her grandmother. Complicated, difficult Maggie. Ellie remembered the good moments. Maggie teaching her to identify wolf tracks, explaining pack dynamics, sharing stories about the wolves she'd studied in the 70s. They're loyal to death, Maggie had said. Wolves mate for life. When one dies, the other howls for days. But she also remembered the bad moments. Maggie's cruelty to her father, the way she'd made Thomas feel small and insufficient, the cutting comments. A logger. Really, Sarah? That's the best you could do? Her father shrinking with every visit, growing quieter, darker. 2 years ago, Ellie had found him in the garage. She was 8 years old. She'd gone looking for him to show him a drawing she'd made. A wolf family. Careful detail on every paw and ear. He'd been sitting in his truck, engine running, garage door closed. She'd opened the side door and the carbon monoxide had hit her like a wall. She'd screamed. Her mother had come running. They'd dragged him out, called 911, saved his life. That time. 3 months later, he tried again. Pills this time. They didn't find him fast enough. At the funeral, Maggie had whispered, "I'm sorry." But Sarah had turned away. The damage was done. The silence between them had calcified into something harder than stone. Now they were both out here, lost in the snow, and Ellie didn't know if they'd died hating each other or if they'd found some measure of peace. 3 days earlier, after the photographs were finished, Sarah and Maggie had started back toward the cabin. The temperature was dropping, clouds gathering. The storm everyone had predicted was coming early. They were halfway home when Maggie stopped abruptly in the middle of the trail. "Where's Henry?" Her voice had changed, lost the clarity it had held all morning. "I need to get home to Henry. He'll be worried." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Mom, Henry died 10 years ago. I'm Sarah, your daughter." Maggie's face twisted with confusion, then anger. "You're lying. My husband is waiting for me. I need to go home." She turned and walked off the trail into the trees, moving fast. "Mom, stop! The ravines are this way. It's dangerous." Sarah chased after her, camera bag banging against her hip. Snow deeper here, away from the packed trail. Her lungs burned. The cancer made every breath agony, but she couldn't lose her mother to the wilderness. She caught up a quarter-mile off trail, in an area of rocky outcroppings and hidden drop-offs. "Mom, please. You're confused. It's the Alzheimer's. You need to come back with me." For a moment, Maggie's eyes cleared. Recognition. Horror at what she'd done. "Sarah? I'm sorry, I didn't—" The ground beneath them shifted. They were standing on a snow bridge over a ravine. The morning sun had warmed it just enough to weaken the structure. When Maggie stepped backward, it collapsed. Both women fell. Sarah managed to grab a tree root halfway down the 30-foot drop. She clung desperately, legs dangling, camera bag swinging. "Mom, where are you?" Below, Maggie had landed on a narrow ledge. Her leg was bent at a wrong angle. She was conscious, crying. "Sarah, I can't move. Hold on." Sarah tried to find footing, tried to pull herself up. The route was slick with ice. Her hands were going numb. The route gave way. She fell the rest of the distance, landed hard on stone and snow. Something in her legs snapped. Pain whited out her vision. When she could see again, she was lying next to her mother on the ledge, both of them broken, both of them trapped. Her phone had shattered in the fall. The camera equipment was destroyed. No one knew where they were. Above them, the sky darkened. The first snowflakes began to fall. In the present, Silverback suddenly stopped walking. Ellie nearly collided with the wolf's hindquarters. They'd reached the edge of a ravine, exactly the kind her father had warned her about. Snow had drifted over the edge, making it impossible to see where solid ground ended and empty air began. Two more wolves emerged from the trees, smaller than Silverback, one adult female, one juvenile. They approached cautiously, sniffed Ellie without aggression, then took positions on either side of the child. Silverback's pack, what remained of it. The three wolves formed a semicircle at the ravine's edge, all of them staring down into the drop-off. All of them with the same urgent, focused energy. "Down there?" Ellie asked. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Hypothermia was setting in. The world had taken on a strange, dreamy quality. "They're down there?" Silverback threw her head back and howled. The sound was primal, mournful, a song of grief and loyalty that echoed through the forest. The other wolves joined in, three voices harmonizing. Ellie understood. The wolves had been guarding this place, keeping watch over the fallen. She dropped to her knees at the ravine's edge, cleared away snow, looked down. She saw scattered belongings first. A camera bag, a broken tripod, a red jacket, and then she saw them. Two figures on a ledge 30 feet below, one lying motionless, one sitting up, waving weakly. "Grandma?" Ellie's voice cracked. "Grandma!" The sitting figure looked up. Even from this distance, Ellie could see the relief, the joy, the desperate hope on her grandmother's face. "Ellie, oh God, Ellie, you found us!" "Where's Mom?" Ellie shouted down. But even as she asked, she knew the other figure wasn't moving at all. Maggie's face crumpled. She couldn't speak. She just pointed. Ellie's world tilted. The dreamy quality shattered into something sharp and terrible. She scrambled backward from the edge, shaking her head, denial rising like bile. "No, no, 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 no." But her body was already moving. The part of her that was her father's daughter, trained in survival and action, took over. She examined the ravine wall, steep but climbable. Tree roots, handholds in the rock. Dangerous, but possible. She looked at Silverback. "I have to go down there." The wolf whined, paced at the edge. She couldn't follow. Too steep. But the other two wolves took positions at the top, as if standing guard. Ellie began her descent. The climb down was a blur of terror and focus. Handholds that crumbled, roots that held just long enough. Twice she slipped, caught herself on instinct. Her hands were bleeding. She didn't care. When her feet hit the ledge, she stumbled toward the motionless figure. Her mother lay on her back, covered by her grandmother's jacket. Sarah's face was gray-tinged, lips purple, eyes closed, peaceful, like she was sleeping. Ellie fell to her knees, touched her mother's face, ice cold, stiff. The sound that came out of her wasn't human. It was something primal, the grief of a child who'd just lost everything. She collapsed onto her mother's body, sobbing, shaking her, begging her to wake up. "Mom, please, please don't be dead. I need you so much." Behind her, Maggie was crying too. Ellie, baby, I'm so sorry. She died yesterday morning. I tried to keep her warm, but how long? Ellie couldn't stop touching her mother's face, her hair, her frozen hands. 2 days ago we fell. She was hurt badly. Internal injuries. She was in so much pain. Maggie's voice broke. She died in her sleep. Peaceful. She didn't suffer at the end. Ellie pulled back, looked at her grandmother for the first time. Maggie looked like a corpse herself, lips cracked and bleeding, face gaunt, leg clearly broken, eyes hollowed by pain and grief. And 3 days of exposure. But she was alive and lucid. More lucid than Ellie had seen her in months. Why? Ellie's voice was small, childlike. Why did she have to die? Maggie's face twisted with a grief that went beyond the present moment. Because I wasn't good enough. Because I failed her. Because I drove her husband to despair, and her to this God-forsaken ravine. And now she's dead, and I'm still here. And that's not how it's supposed to be. The old woman was breaking down, the stoicism that had kept her alive for 3 days finally cracking. It should have been me. I'm old. I'm useless. I'm forgetting everything. She had you. She had her whole life. It should have been me. Ellie looked at her grandmother through the haze of her own grief and saw something she'd never seen before. Maggie wasn't the cruel, judgmental woman who'd made her father feel worthless. She was a broken human being who'd made terrible mistakes and had been trying, too late, always too late, to fix them. The wolf, Ellie said suddenly. How did she? Silverback found us the day after we fell. Maggie's voice steadied slightly. She brought food, a rabbit. I couldn't reach it, but she left it where I could drag myself to it. And at night, Maggie's voice broke again. She lay against my body, kept me warm. 3 nights. She's been here 3 nights, refusing to leave. Ellie looked up at the ravine's edge. Silverback stared down, patient and watchful. I should have died, Maggie whispered. But that wolf wouldn't let me, even when I wanted to. Even when I begged God to take me, she stayed. Ellie turned back to her mother's body, saw something in the jacket pocket, a sealed envelope in a waterproof bag. She pulled it out with shaking hands, saw her name written in her mother's handwriting. She wrote it before she died, Maggie said softly. She wanted you to know the truth. Ellie's fingers were too numb to open the envelope properly. She tore it, pulled out pages written in her mother's careful script. The letter began, My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and there are things you need to know, things I should have told you long ago. Through tears that froze on her cheeks, Ellie read her mother's final confession, the truth about the cancer, the truth about her father's death, not an accident but suicide driven by the crushing weight of medical debt and depression he couldn't fight, the truth about why Sarah had never blamed her mother, not really, the truth about forgiveness that came too late to be spoken, but not too late to matter. The letter ended. You are braver than you know, smarter than you think, and more loved than you can imagine. Save yourself. Save Grandma. Live your dream for both of us. All my love, Mom. Ellie looked at her grandmother, who was watching her with red-rimmed eyes. She forgave you? Ellie whispered. She forgave you for everything? Maggie's face collapsed. 47 letters of apology that had never reached their destination, and the one that mattered most had come from the daughter she'd failed. I don't deserve forgiveness. Maybe not, Ellie said, her voice harder than she knew she possessed. But she gave it anyway, and now I have to decide if I'm strong enough to do the same. She looked up at the darkening sky. They were running out of time. The temperature was dropping further. The next wave of the blizzard was coming. If they didn't get out of this ravine soon, there would be 3 bodies instead of 1. Ellie stood on shaking legs, pulled the flare gun from her pack, aimed it at the sky and fired. The red streak cut through the gray. A signal, a prayer, a desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might see. Above them, Silverback and her pack began to howl again. The sound carried for miles, a natural alarm system older than any technology. Ellie screamed until her voice broke. "Help! We're here! Please, help us!" The forest swallowed her words. The snow kept falling, and somewhere in the distance, so faint she might have imagined it, came the sound of helicopter blades cutting through wind. The helicopter materialized through the snow like a mechanical angel, its rotors beating the air into submission. The sound grew from distant whisper to deafening roar as it circled the ravine, searchlight cutting through the gray afternoon. Ellie waved frantically, screaming herself hoarse. On the ledge, Maggie had dragged herself to where she could be seen, one arm raised despite the pain. Above, Silverback and her pack had vanished into the trees, the noise and downdraft too much for wild animals to bear. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker, barely audible over the rotors. "We see you! Stay where you are! Help is coming!" Relief hit Ellie like a physical force. She collapsed to her knees beside her mother's body, gasping, crying, laughing. "We're saved! Grandma, we're saved!" But the helicopter was struggling. Wind gusts buffeted it violently, the pilot fighting for control. The ravine was too narrow, the surrounding trees too tall. There was no clear landing zone. The aircraft circled once, twice, attempting to descend, but each time the wind caught it and pushed it away. Ellie watched the helicopter bank sharply, trying to approach from a different angle. The pilot was skilled. She could see the delicate adjustments, the careful maneuvering. The aircraft dropped lower, rotors churning snow into a blinding vortex. Then a sudden downdraft hit. The helicopter spun, tail rotor whipping around. The pilot overcorrected. The aircraft tilted sickeningly. "No," Ellie whispered. "No, no, no." The helicopter crashed into the trees 100 yards from the ravine. The sound of tearing metal and breaking branches was obscene. The rotors sheared off, sent spinning into the forest. The main body of the aircraft rolled once, twice, came to rest on its side against a massive Douglas fir. Small flames licked at the engine compartment. Smoke began to rise. The rescue had become another disaster. Ellie didn't think. Her body moved on instinct, scrambling back up the ravine wall using the same handholds she'd descended. Her hands were numb, bleeding, but fear gave her strength. Behind her, Maggie was screaming her name, begging her to stay, but Ellie couldn't stop. Someone was in that helicopter, someone who'd come to save them. She wouldn't let them die. She reached the top, stumbled through knee-deep snow toward the crash site. The wreckage was worse up close. The cockpit crushed, the windshield shattered, one door hanging open at a wrong angle. "Hello?" Ellie's voice was raw. "Is anyone alive?" A groan answered her. The pilot was crawling from the wreckage, one leg twisted beneath him, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He was maybe 45, Hispanic, wearing a flight suit with a medical evacuation patch on the shoulder. His name tag read Torres. "Kid," he gasped, "get back! Fuel leak! Might explode!" Ellie grabbed his arms and pulled. He was heavy, much heavier than her, but adrenaline made her strong. She dragged him 15 feet from the helicopter before her strength gave out. Both of them collapsed in the snow, gasping. The helicopter's flames grew but didn't explode. Not yet. Torres looked at her with dazed eyes. "Where are your parents?" "My mom's dead. She's in the ravine. My grandma's down there too, alive but hurt. We need help." Torres tried to sit up, cried out in pain. His leg was badly broken, bone pressing against the skin. "Radio's destroyed. Can't call for backup. I can't walk. We're all trapped now." The bitter irony wasn't lost on Ellie. The rescuer needed rescuing. She pulled out her first aid kit, depleted now but still useful. Working on autopilot, she treated Torres's head wound, stabilized his leg as best she could with the supplies she had. Her father had taught her basic trauma care. She'd never thought she'd use it on a helicopter pilot who'd crashed trying to save her. "You're good at this," Torres said through gritted teeth. "How old are you?" 10? He stared at her. "Jesus Christ, 10 years old and you're—" He stopped, shook his head. "Your parents raised you right." "My dad's dead too," Ellie said flatly. 2 years ago. Suicide." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because her mother's letter had finally given her permission to name the truth. Maybe because she was too exhausted to lie anymore. Torres was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, kid. That's a hell of a thing to carry." They sat in the snow, a broken pilot and a traumatized child, while the temperature dropped and daylight faded. "How did you know where to look?" Ellie asked. "Your uncle called it in. Marcus Hartwell. Said his sister and mother were missing. Been searching for 3 days. Gave us the coordinates for this area, said to check the ravines." Ellie's blood went cold. "Uncle Marcus? How did he know where to look?" "Said he'd been tracking them, following their trail." Torres frowned. "Why? Is that weird?" "Marcus hasn't visited us in 2 years. He and my mom had a fight about—" Ellie stopped, remembered. Her grandmother owned the cabin and land, had left it to Sarah in her will, not to Marcus. And Marcus worked for a logging company that wanted to develop the area. If Sarah and Maggie died, the property would go to Ellie, a child, easily manipulated or declared incompetent by a guardian like Uncle Marcus. "He knew where they were," Ellie said slowly. "He knew, and he waited. He wanted them to die." Torres's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation." "He said something to you, didn't he? Something that didn't make sense?" Torres thought back. "He told me to take my time. Said no rush. They'd probably been dead for days anyway. I thought it was weird. Usually family is frantic, begging us to hurry, but he was calm, almost relieved." Ellie felt sick. Her uncle had followed them into the wilderness, watched them fall, and left them to freeze to death. Had delayed calling for rescue until he was sure they'd be dead. His own sister and mother. For money, for land, for a logging contract. The sound of a snowmobile cut through her spiraling thoughts. Getting closer. Someone else was coming. Torres tried to reach for his sidearm. Pilots carried them for protection in wilderness areas, but it was trapped in the wreckage. "Ellie, get behind me!" But Ellie was already standing, father's knife in her hand, as the snowmobile appeared through the trees. The man riding it was tall, well-built, wearing expensive winter gear that was too clean for someone who'd been searching the wilderness for days. He had Sarah's nose, Maggie's sharp chin, family resemblance that made Ellie's stomach turn. Uncle Marcus. He saw them and stopped the snowmobile. For a moment, he just stared. Then something cold and calculating crossed his face. "Ellie, you're alive. That's surprising. Not, thank God. Not, are you hurt? Not, where's your mother? Just surprised that she'd survived." You knew where they were, Ellie said. Her voice was steady, cold. You followed them. You watched them fall. You left them to die. Marcus's expression didn't change. That's quite an imagination you have. I called for rescue, didn't I? 3 days later, after you were sure they'd be dead. Can't prove that. Marcus glanced at Torres. This the pilot? Shame about the crash. Head injuries can cause confusion, disorientation. Won't be a reliable witness. Torres tried to stand, collapsed with a cry of pain. You son of a... Careful. Marcus pulled a hunting pistol from his coat, not pointing it at anyone, yet, just holding it. A threat. I found my niece and called for help. That's all anyone needs to know. Tragic accident. The pilot crashed. Everyone died from exposure before backup arrived. These things happen in blizzards. He looked at Ellie. The cold calculation in his eyes was worse than hatred. This was business, mathematics, asset management. I'm sorry, kid. You seem smart, brave even. But that land is worth $2 million to developers. My mother left it to your mother, who's dead now, I assume, which means it goes to you, a 10-year-old with special needs, who would obviously need a legal guardian to manage the property. You, Ellie whispered. Me? And I'd have to make the responsible decision to sell, to give you the financial security you need. Except, he gestured with the gun, if you die too, the estate goes to me directly. Next of kin. No complications, no guardianship hearings, just a clear inheritance. Torres was fumbling in his pockets. His emergency beacon, a personal locator separate from the helicopter systems, was still there, still transmitting. Marcus didn't know, but backup was at least an hour away in this weather, maybe more. They didn't have an hour. You're going to kill us, Ellie said. Statement, not question. I'm going to leave. You're going to die of exposure, natural causes. I tried to help, but I was too late. Marcus was backing toward his snowmobile. Don't worry. I'll make sure your mother gets a nice funeral. All 3 of you, actually. Very sad. Very tragic. He raised the gun properly now, pointing it at Torres. You first, I think. Can't have you radioing for help. A low growl came from the trees. Marcus froze. What was that? 3 wolves emerged from the forest, Silverback in the lead, the other 2 flanking her. They moved with purpose, spreading out to form a semicircle, trapping Marcus between them and the humans. Marcus swung the gun toward Silverback. I'll shoot. I swear I'll shoot. She saved my grandmother, Ellie said, stepping forward. Her voice was clear, strong. She stayed with her for 3 days, kept her warm, brought her food. She's more family than you ever were. Ellie, don't... Torres tried to reach for her, but she was beyond his grasp. Ellie positioned herself between Marcus and Silverback, her father's knife in one hand, nothing but determination in her stance. You want to inherit? You'll have to shoot me first, in front of a witness who's recording everything. Torres held up his GoPro camera, standard issue for medical evacuation pilots, mounted on his helmet, still recording despite the crash. Every word Marcus had said, every threat, every cold calculation. It's all on camera, Marcus. You shoot her, you go to prison. You leave us to die. You go to prison. You're done. Marcus's hand shook. The gun wavered between Ellie and Torres and the wolves. His perfect plan unraveling, his face twisted with rage and desperation. He made his choice. Marcus turned and ran toward his snowmobile, gun still in hand. Didn't watch where he was stepping. His boot came down on the same kind of hidden ice sheet that had taken Sarah and Maggie. His feet went out from under him. The gun discharged into the air. He fell backward, hard, and kept falling. He'd been standing at the ravine's edge without realizing it, the same ravine that had taken his sister. Marcus Hartwell fell 30 feet, screaming, and landed in the rocks below. The screaming stopped. Ellie ran to the edge, looked down. Marcus was lying motionless near where her mother's body lay. Poetic justice in the cruelest form. "Is he dead?" Torres called out. "I don't know. He's not moving." Ellie felt nothing, no satisfaction, no grief, just a numb emptiness where stronger emotions should have been. Silverback approached, pressed her head against Ellie's leg. The wolf's warmth was real, solid, a reminder that she was still alive, still here, still fighting. "We need to get Grandma out," Ellie said. "Before dark, before the next storm." "Backup's coming," Torres assured her, tapping the beacon. "This thing's been transmitting since before the crash. Real rescue teams are on the way, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour. But they're coming." Ellie looked at the darkening sky, at the wolves standing guard, at Torres, broken but alive, at the ravine that held her mother's body, her grandmother's broken form, and now her uncle's unconscious bulk. She'd walked into the forest that morning following a wolf, and found death and betrayal and a family more fractured than she'd ever imagined. But she'd also found truth and strength, and the kind of loyalty that transcended species. In the distance she heard it. Multiple helicopters, snowmobiles, the sound of a professional search and rescue operation finally arriving. She sat down in the snow next to Torres, Silverback lying beside her, and waited for salvation. This time it came. The silence after Marcus fell was worse than the screaming. Ellie stood at the ravine's edge, staring down at her uncle's motionless form sprawled 30 feet below. He'd landed near her mother's body, one arm twisted beneath him at an impossible angle, blood darkening the snow around his head. "Ellie!" Torres's voice was weak. "Get away from the edge. Come back here." She obeyed mechanically, walking back to where the pilot lay in the snow. Her legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Shock was setting in, the adrenaline that had kept her moving finally draining away. Torres was worse than he'd been 10 minutes ago. His face had taken on a gray pallor, lips tinged blue. The makeshift splint on his leg was soaked through with blood. His breathing had become shallow, rapid. "How long until backup arrives?" Ellie's voice sounded small. Torres checked his beacon with shaking hands. "Signals transmitting. They know where we are. But in this weather—" He trailed off, didn't finish the thought. They both knew what it meant. In a blizzard at dusk with multiple casualties scattered across treacherous terrain, even the best rescue team would struggle. It could be an hour, could be 3, could be too late. Ellie looked at Silverback, who'd settled in the snow nearby. The wolf's bandaged leg had soaked through completely, blood freezing in dark patches on her silver fur. She'd pushed herself beyond any reasonable limit, and now she was paying the price. "You should go," Ellie told the wolf. "Go home. You did enough." Silverback's amber eyes met hers. The wolf didn't move. The other 2 wolves had taken positions in the trees, forming a perimeter, guarding. Even now, even wounded, the pack maintained its watch over the broken humans they'd chosen to protect. Ellie's hands were shaking. Now that she'd stopped moving, the cold was crushing. Her fingers had gone past numb into a wooden uselessness. Her toes burned with what she knew was frostbite. The parka that had seemed adequate hours ago was soaked through with sweat and melted snow. She was going to die out here. They all were. The thought came with strange clarity. Her mother was already dead. Her uncle probably was, too. Torres was bleeding internally, his breathing increasingly labored. Her grandmother was trapped in a ravine with a broken leg and 3 days of exposure. And Ellie herself. She was 10 years old, alone, suffering from hypothermia and exhaustion. The wolves couldn't save them from this. No amount of loyalty could defeat physics and temperature and time. "Hey," Torres's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Kid, look at me." She turned. "You're going into shock. I can see it. You need to keep moving, keep your blood flowing. Can you do that for me?" "I'm so tired." "I know, but if you sit down now, you won't get back up. Your dad—" "What would he tell you right now?" Ellie's throat tightened. "He'd say fear is normal, panic kills, count your breaths. Then count and move. Walk in circles if you have to. Just don't stop." She forced herself to stand, to walk. Her legs screamed protest, but she counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe out. Small circles in the snow. Keep moving. Stay alive. From the ravine below, a sound drifted up. Maggie's voice, weak but unmistakable. "Ellie, are you still there?" Ellie stumbled to the edge. "I'm here, Grandma. Is help coming?" "Yes, soon." A long pause. Then, "I heard shouting. Was that Marcus?" Ellie didn't know how to answer. Didn't want to explain that her uncle had tried to kill them, had fallen, might be dead. She settled for, "He's here." Another pause. "I'm cold, Ellie. So cold." 3 days in the ravine. 3 days in negative temperatures. It was a miracle Maggie was still conscious, still coherent. But miracles had limits. "Tell me something," Maggie called up, her voice fading. "Tell me about your wolves." Ellie looked at Silverback. "I saved her when she was a pup, 6 months ago. Someone set illegal traps. Her and her brothers and sisters were caught. Mom and I freed them. Silverback was hurt the worst, her leg. We thought she might not make it. But she did. She did. And she remembered. When you and Mom didn't come home, she came to get me, led me here, stayed with you when you fell. She's been protecting you all along." Maggie's laugh was bitter. "I spent my whole career studying wolf behavior, pack dynamics, loyalty structures. I published 17 papers on wolf social bonds, and I never saw anything like this." "What do you mean?" "Wolves don't usually bond with humans outside their pack. Not like this. They're not dogs. They're wild." Maggie's voice strengthened slightly, the scientist in her fighting through the pain and cold. "But there are documented cases. Rare instances where a wolf remembers a kindness, where gratitude overrides instinct. She saved you." "She did what I couldn't do. She protected the family I broke." Maggie's voice cracked. "I drove your father to his death, Ellie. I know you know. I know Sarah told you in that letter." Ellie closed her eyes. "She said you were wrong, but she forgave you. I don't deserve forgiveness." "Maybe not, but she gave it anyway." Ellie was crying now, hot tears freezing on her cheeks. "And I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm that good. You don't have to be good. You just have to be honest." Maggie's breathing was labored. I was cruel to your father. I judged him for being working class, for not having a college degree, for struggling with depression. I made him feel small, and small men do desperate things. Below, in the ravine, Ellie could hear her grandmother weeping. I wrote Sarah 47 letters apologizing. 47 times I tried to say I was sorry. But the Alzheimer's, or the tumor, whatever it is, I'd forget I'd written them. I'd write the same apology again and again. She never got any of them. She knew anyway. She wrote it in her letter. Read it to me, please. I need to hear her words. Ellie pulled the letter from her pocket with numb fingers. In the fading light, she read her mother's words aloud, the confession about cancer, the truth about Thomas's suicide, the medical debt that had broken him, and then the part about Maggie. Grandma Maggie was right about many things. She wasn't cruel, she was scared. She lost her dream to raise me. She didn't want me to lose mine. Forgive her, love her. She needs you now. Silence from the ravine. Then the sound of broken sobbing. Torres had been quiet, but now he spoke. My mother and I didn't talk for 5 years. Stupid fight over money. I was too proud to apologize. She died of a stroke before we could fix it. He coughed, the sound wet and painful. Don't waste time on pride, kid. Life's too short and too cold. The wind was picking up again. The next wave of the storm was arriving, temperature plummeting further. Ellie's circles in the snow were getting smaller, her steps dragging. Silverback stood, limped over to Ellie, pressed her body against the child's legs, offering warmth. The other wolves moved closer too, forming a windbreak with their bodies. They won't leave you, Torres observed. Pack mentality. You're one of them now. Ellie sank down, sitting between the wolves, letting their body heat seep into her frozen core. Silverback laid her head in Ellie's lap. The wolf's breathing was labored, blood still seeping from the trap wound despite the bandage. You're hurt, Ellie whispered, running numb fingers through silver fur. You should have stayed away. Let the humans fix their own problems. Silverback's eyes drifted closed, resting but not sleeping, still alert, still guarding. In the distance, finally, unmistakably, came the sound of engines, multiple snowmobiles, the deeper thrum of heavy-duty rescue vehicles, voices calling through the wind, real help, professional rescuers with proper equipment, medical training, the resources to evacuate multiple casualties from treacherous terrain. They'd made it. Against impossible odds, they'd survived long enough. Torres tried to sit up, couldn't manage it. Over here! His shout was weak, wouldn't carry far in the wind. Ellie found her voice. Help! We're here! We need help! The wolves joined in, howling. 3 voices harmonizing, carrying across the forest in a way human voices never could. A beacon of sound cutting through the storm. The engines grew louder. Searchlights appeared through the trees, sweeping the area. A voice through a megaphone. This is Yellowstone Search and Rescue. If you can hear us, make noise. Ellie screamed until her throat was raw. Torres fired his flare gun, the red streak cutting through the darkening sky. The wolves howled again, and then they were surrounded by people, professional rescuers in high-tech gear, moving with practiced efficiency. Paramedics dropped beside Torres, began assessment. Others moved to the ravine's edge, setting up rappelling equipment. A woman in her 40s, wearing a jacket marked Team Leader Chen, knelt beside Ellie. Are you Eleanor Blackwood? Ellie nodded, unable to speak. We've got you, honey. You're safe now. We're going to get everyone out. My mom, we know. We'll take care of her. I promise. My grandma. Team's going down right now. We'll have her out in 15 minutes. My uncle? Him, too. Ellie collapsed into the woman's arms, the last of her strength evaporating. She was lifted onto a stretcher, thermal blankets wrapped around her. Someone was putting an IV in her arm, warm fluid that burned as it entered her frozen veins. The wolves had retreated into the trees at the arrival of so many humans, but Silverback lingered at the edge of the clearing, watching, making sure. The last thing Ellie saw before the world faded to gray was the wolf's amber eyes, reflecting the searchlights. Then darkness took her, and she knew nothing more. Ellie woke in a hospital room flooded with winter sunlight. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The last thing she remembered was searchlights and voices and the feeling of being lifted. Her hands were bandaged. IV lines snaked from her arms. Monitors beeped steadily. Her fingers and toes throbbed with the deep ache of treated frostbite, but the doctors had told her she'd keep all her digits. Small miracle. A nurse noticed she was awake. "Welcome back, sweetheart. You've been out for 14 hours. My grandma, she's alive, in surgery right now. They're setting her leg and removing a brain tumor." Ellie's exhausted mind struggled to process that. Tumor? I thought she had Alzheimer's. No Alzheimer's. The tumor was pressing on her memory centers, causing dementia-like symptoms. The neurosurgeon says it's operable. She could make a full recovery. Full recovery. Her grandmother could be herself again. Remember everything. Be the scientist she had been before the tumor stole her mind. And my uncle? The nurse's expression hardened. Alive. Spinal injury. He'll survive to stand trial. Trial. Because Marcus had tried to kill them, had left his own sister and mother to die for money. There's a detective who wants to talk to you when you're ready. And a pilot. Torres. He's been asking about you every hour. Torres was 3 rooms down, his leg in traction, head bandaged, but alive and alert. When Ellie shuffled in with her IV pole, he grinned. "There's my survivor, toughest 10-year-old I ever met. You saved us. If you hadn't come, I crashed and almost got us all killed. But you had the beacon and the camera." Torres's expression grew serious. "About that. The GoPro footage, I gave it to the police. Every word your uncle said is on there. His confession about watching them fall, about waiting for them to die, about planning to kill us. It's ironclad evidence." Will he go to prison? For a long time. Attempted murder, criminal negligence, asset fraud. Turns out he was already embezzling from his logging company. This was just his latest scheme. Torres paused. "Your grandmother's property is safe. He can't touch it." Ellie felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The land her grandmother loved, that her mother had died trying to preserve, was protected. "There's something else," Torres said. The media picked up the story. Girl rescued by wolf she'd saved. It's everywhere. Local news, national news, social media. You're viral. I don't want to be famous. Too late. But here's the thing. People want to help. Someone started a GoFundMe for your medical bills and your grandma's surgery. They've raised over $800,000. Ellie stared at him. "That's not possible. It's real. Complete strangers saw your story and wanted to help. The medical bills, the mortgage, your grandmother's surgery, it's all covered now. Plus there's money left over for your future, college fund, whatever you need." $800,000. More money than Ellie had ever imagined. Enough to save everything her mother had been struggling to preserve. "There's more," Torres continued. "National Geographic called. Your mother's camera survived the fall. It was in a waterproof case. The photos she took of the elk herd before she fell? They're publishing them. Cover story. Last Light, a photographer's final journey. There's an award named after her now, the Sarah Blackwood Memorial Photography Prize. Ellie's eyes burned with tears. Her mother had died believing she'd failed, that her dream of being a professional photographer had died with her father's suicide and the mounting debt. But she'd succeeded, just not in time to know it. "She would have been so happy," Ellie whispered. "She would have been proud of you." A doctor appeared in the doorway, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. "Eleanor, I'm Dr. Kim. I operated on your grandmother. She came through surgery beautifully. The tumor is out. We're running tests, but I'm optimistic about her cognitive recovery." "Can I see her?" "She's in recovery, but yes, she's been asking for you." Maggie looked small in the hospital bed, her leg elevated in a cast, her head wrapped in bandages. But her eyes were clear, sharp, present in a way they hadn't been in months. "Ellie," her voice was steady. "They told me about the tumor, about the surgery. I can already feel the difference. The fog is lifting." Ellie took her grandmother's hand. "You're going to be okay. Because of you. Because you followed that wolf into a blizzard." Maggie's eyes filled with tears. "Your mother would be so proud. I'm so proud." "I read her letter to you, in the ravine. Do you remember?" "I remember everything now. The fall, the 3 days waiting, Sarah dying in my arms. That wolf lying against me every night, keeping me warm. I remember." Maggie's voice broke. "I remember my daughter forgiving me before she died, and I'll carry that gift for whatever time I have left." They sat in silence, hands clasped, two survivors holding on to each other and the memory of the woman they'd both loved. A nurse interrupted. "There's someone at the window. Says she won't leave until you come out." Ellie walked to the first-floor window and looked out at the hospital's small courtyard. Silverback stood in the snow, amber eyes fixed on the building. The wolf's leg had been treated by the veterinary team that accompanied the rescue, sedated, properly cleaned and stitched, bandaged professionally. Ellie opened the door, stepped outside in her hospital gown and slippers. The cold bit immediately, but she ignored it. Silverback approached slowly, limping but stronger than she'd been in the forest. The wolf stopped 3 feet away, close enough to touch but maintaining the distance wild things needed. "Thank you," Ellie whispered. "You saved us. You kept Grandma alive. You brought me to them. You protected us from Marcus. We owe you everything." The wolf's tail swished once, not quite a wag, but acknowledgement. A veterinarian from the rescue team had followed Ellie outside. She held a scanning device. "May I? I'd like to check if she's chipped." Ellie nodded. The vet scanned Silverback's shoulder, frowned at the reading. "She is chipped. The database shows." Her expression shifted to wonder. "This wolf was registered 6 months ago. Age at registration, 4 months. Tagged as part of a rescue from illegal traps. One of 5 pups saved by—" She looked at Ellie. "By Sarah and Eleanor Blackwood." "She's not the mother wolf," Ellie breathed. "She's one of the pups. She's the one we saved." The rescued had become the rescuer. The injured pup Ellie had freed from a trap, had worried might not survive, had grown into the wolf that led her through a blizzard to save her family. "Gray wolves grow fast," the vet said softly. 4 months to 10 months, she'd reached nearly full size. You saved her life. She returned the favor." Silverback held Ellie's gaze for a long moment. Then the wolf turned and limped toward the trees at the edge of the hospital grounds. At the tree line she looked back once, then vanished into the forest. Ellie stood in the snow, watching the place where the wolf had disappeared, and understood. Silverback was wild, always had been. The debt was paid, the circle was complete, but she knew somehow that it wasn't the end. Some bonds transcended circumstance. Some loyalty lasted beyond a single act of salvation. She went back inside to her grandmother's room, to the warmth and safety and the beginning of healing. 3 months later, Ellie stood in the kitchen of the cabin that was no longer at risk of foreclosure. Maggie moved easily now, her leg healed, her mind sharp and clear without the tumor pressing on her memory centers. They were making her mother's favorite soup together. "Your mother always added too much salt," Maggie said, smiling through tears. "I'd complain, but I'd give anything to taste her cooking again." "Me too," Ellie whispered. They talked about Sarah openly now, not just the grief but the laughter, the memories, the love that survived death. Maggie had read all 47 letters she'd written and forgotten, wept over the forgiveness she'd received too late to acknowledge in person. Marcus was in prison awaiting trial, his logging company under investigation, his assets frozen. The land was safe, protected, designated as the Sarah Blackwood Memorial Wildlife Reserve. Every week Silverback appeared at the forest edge. Ellie would bring food, venison from local hunters who donated to the cause, and the wolf would accept it, allow brief contact, then disappear back into the wild. Wild, but bonded. 6 years passed. Ellie, at 16, stood at a podium in her high school auditorium, giving a presentation on human-animal bonds. The video had over 10 million views. Stanford and Yale had offered full scholarships, but she chose Montana State. Closer to home, closer to Maggie, closer to the wolves. "A wolf saved my family because we saved hers first," she told the audience. "Kindness isn't wasted. Love isn't limited to our species. That's not sentiment. That's science." On December 24th each year, they held a memorial at the bronze statue of Silverback that stood at the Yellowstone trailhead. Maggie attended every year, sharp and present, teaching at the local college again, her career revived in her 70s. 20 years later, Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, lead researcher for the Yellowstone Wolf Project, brought her 3-year-old daughter to visit great-grandmother Maggie, now 92, but still fierce. "Tell her about the wolves, Ellie," Maggie said. On Christmas Eve, Ellie took little Sarah to the memorial statue. "A wolf saved Mommy when Mommy was little, because Mommy saved the wolf first." "Wolves are good?" her daughter asked. "Wolves are wild, but they remember kindness, just like we should." An elderly wolf appeared at the tree line. Silverback, impossibly old at 20 years, moved slowly but with dignity. She looked at Ellie one last time. Recognition, farewell, then disappeared into the forest. 3 months later, rangers found Silverback's body. She'd died peacefully in her sleep. But that spring, Ellie saw a young wolf watching the cabin. Silver fur along her back. Amber eyes, Silverback's descendant, carrying on the bond. Ellie watched her daughter approach the wolf carefully, offering her hand. The wolf sniffed, didn't flee. "We saved each other," Ellie whispered to the wind, to her mother's memory, to the forest that had taken so much and given back even more. "We're still saving each other, and that's a story worth telling." The circle was complete. The legacy lived on. And love, human, wolf, or otherwise, transcended everything. Sometimes the hardest words to say are, "I'm sorry," and "I forgive you." Maggie spent years trapped behind walls of pride and regret, watching her daughter slip away because she couldn't admit she'd been wrong. Sound familiar? We've all been there, holding on to old hurts, waiting for the perfect moment to reconcile, believing we have all the time in the world. But time doesn't wait. Sarah died before she and her mother could speak their forgiveness face to face, yet that forgiveness still healed 3 generations. The letter Sarah left behind proved that love doesn't need perfect timing. It just needs honesty. And here's the beautiful truth. Maggie got a second chance. The tumor was removed, her mind cleared, and she had years to build a relationship with her granddaughter, to teach again, to matter again. It's never too late to reach out to someone you've hurt, or someone who hurt you. It's never too late to say what needs saying. That phone call you've been putting off, that apology you've been rehearsing, that forgiveness you've been withholding. Today is the day. Have you been holding on to a relationship that needs healing? What's stopping you from reaching out today? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear.